Jella? What? Did I say Marissa Meyer with the other one? I probably did. Hello book reading friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Melanie, and today I am here to tier rank every single book I read in 2020. We're talking about 63 books. I thought this would be a more fun alternative to the classic yearly wrap-up or a December wrap-up that I opted to not do, so I hope you guys enjoy this different type of video. I personally think that tier rank videos are not dead yet. I am part of that percentage that loves watching these videos, that find them incredibly fun to watch, so I hope you find this enjoyable because I know I'm about to have a lot of fun. If you have yet to subscribe to my channel, don't forget to do so down below for more bookish videos. I am constantly uploading videos that I am sure you do not want to miss, and I am also live streaming throughout the week doing my weekly reading sprints, and you can also follow me on all of my social medias, which are always linked down below. I have an Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and an Amazon wishlist in case you want to check any of those out. And yeah, I just briefly want to say before I even start with the video, thank you so much for 10,000 subscribers. I was genuinely shocked when I woke up this morning because today, the day that I am filming this, actually marks exactly 6 months since I started Booktube. So I just need to say a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart. I am forever thankful for all of your support, for all of your generosity. I think words truly escape me with this one because I never thought this was gonna be possible, and so it is all due to you guys. I just need to thank you constantly, and I don't think words can actually describe my gratitude for all that you do. You guys are literally unmatched. I will never stop saying that. And yeah, before I get too sappy, let's get right started with the video because we are tier ranking 63 books. It's gonna take a hot minute, so let's get into it. I have my computer in such a dangerous position right now. If you see me looking down, I am looking at my computer. Okay, we're recording. So what you guys are seeing is a tier maker that I made with every single book that I read last year. For the different tiers that I have, at the bottom, I have 5 tiers by the way. At the bottom, I have It Must Be Burned at the Stake. These are books that I absolutely regret reading. I would literally scratch my eyes out before reading these books again. And again, if you've loved these books, I am so glad that you have because my experience with them was not that pleasant. Then we have But Why? Why was that book so bad? It was not the worst book out there, but it was pretty bad. On top of that, we have Average Baby. It is the middle of the tier. It was most likely a 3 stars, something that I am more indifferent towards. The second tier is called Let's Kiss with the smirk, which means that it's a book that I loved a lot, but it was not quite just the best book out there. And then the top tier is When's the Wedding and a devil face. When's the Wedding basically means when are we getting married? When are we making babies? When are we having a life together? Because I just want you there all the time. A book that I would reread, regardless if it's a part of a series, I would just read that book over and over again. So let's get right started with this tier ranking situation. I am excited to see where we rank all of these because regardless of what rating they got when I read them, whether they were a 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, or so on, they would not exactly fall under that category in the tier ranking situation. I am ranking these more along the lines of enjoyment, and now that I can actually ponder on these books, I actually have an opinion. So the first book I have in my ranking situation is actually Again But Better by Christine Riccio. Summarized, this book is about a girl called Shane who lies to her parents and instead of going to a medical program aboard in the UK, actually goes for a writing program. It is a coming of age story. It is magical realism in a way which I was definitely not expecting when I was reading. I truly feel after watching Christine from Poland Bananas books for the longest time, she was one of the first booktubers that I watched. The main character is a reflection of herself. I will say a lot of things hit home with this one in regards to college and life, just a bunch of things in there. I really was crying throughout this book. So there were parts of it that were enjoyable to me. So I'm going to put this at Average Baby. The next book I have in here is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, a book that you know I adore. It's one of my favorite series, and in this book we follow Feyre, who is a huntress. She provides for her family all of the time, and one day on the woods she sees a wolf and she shoots the wolf intentionally without knowing that the wolf is actually Fae. And so Tamlin from the Spring Court comes to claim Feyre's life in exchange of that that fae that she actually murdered in the woods. It's very action-packed towards the end, this particular book. I think the first one in particular, and I think this is a general consensus with Sarah J. Maas, with Throne of Glass and A Court of Thorns and Roses, first installment's definitely not the best one. It truly feels like a prologue for what's to follow. So I am going to put this an average baby. It is truly middle of the tier for me, although I have given this book 4 stars every single time that I reread. Right beside it is A Court of Mist and Fury, which is the second book in A Court of Thorns and Roses series. ACOMAF is one of my favorite books of all time. I just adore this book with my entire being. The smut in here is A-level. The story progression in here, towards the beginning of the book, Feyre as a main character is dealing with a lot of trauma and PTSD. She reunites with a group of characters that we don't really get to see in book 1, and we get to see a lot of the Night Court and just a lot of other courts in general that we really didn't get to see in book 1. This book most definitely goes in When's the Wedding. Like, I reread this book all the time without even reading the first book. That is how much I adore ACOMAF. Then we have the third book in A Court of Thorns and Roses series, which is A Court of Wings and Ruin. A book that I have not reread as many times as I have ACOMAF, but it's still a book that shines in its own right. There is a lot of political intrigue in here. The battle scenes in here are also incredible. I think there's a lot of suspense and just a lot of stress in this book because everything is so high stakes at this point. Not quite in When's the Wedding, but most definitely in Let's Kiss. I have a lot of fun memories reading this book whenever I reread it. Then we have A Curse to Dark and Lonely, another Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I will say it's probably my favorite Beauty and the Beast retelling that I have ever read. In this one, we follow Prince Ren, who has been cursed by a powerful enchantress to become a beast and basically just kill everyone in his own kingdom, and his only companion is one of his royal guards. And every once in a while, that royal guard must come to the regular world, snatch a girl up, take her back to the kingdom to make her fall in love with the prince. The romance was so well paced for a retelling. I feel like retellings oftentimes are incredibly fast paced and they oftentimes feel unrealistic, which I feel comes with that retelling aspect. The main character also has cerebral palsy, and that one is definitely going in Let's Kiss. I genuinely love that book. Like, it's such a great one. Oh boy. The next one is actually An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I do not like this book one bit, and I feel like I am on the part of the unpopular opinion with this one. We follow a human girl who is actually a painter, and she constantly paints the fae, and one day she actually offers to paint, I think it is what would be like the High Lord of a court. I can't remember which one it is. I think it may be the Autumn Court. She actually paints something in his eyes that should never be painted in a fae's eyes. So he comes back to claim her life and to take her back to his court to hold her for trial. This girl, it was like chapter 3, and she was already claiming that she was in love with this fae male. The side characters were just incredibly weird to me. The sequence of events in general just felt so rushed. This book is incredibly short for a fantasy. I don't think it lends the author enough time to actually establish the world that she wanted to establish. I bold claim with this one. I'm gonna say it must be burned at the stake. I'm sorry for anyone who has loved this book. The next one is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. And I also have conflicting thoughts about this book. And in this book in particular, we follow Pip, who does not believe that Salil Singh murdered his girlfriend, Andy Bell. And so as her final project in school, she actually takes it upon herself to investigate and to dig a little bit deeper into this murder. The ending, to me, there was just one part of it that made no sense. It was incredibly underwhelming. I just maybe need to reread it at one point to see if it actually makes sense to me. But this one is going in, but why? The next one we have here is A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Ms. JLA. I genuinely adored that book so much, and I think that one in particular reminds me so much of ACOMAF. And in this one in particular, there is a lot more smut, there is a lot more battle scenes. The world building in this one is a lot bigger. We get to see the things that we didn't particularly get to see in book 1. The writing on this one actually improved, in my opinion. Castile Denier, I will never say it's enough. Like, truly, that character will be the end of me. Everything about Castile Denier is like compelling. Like, he is a compelling character. It's definitely going in When's the Wedding. Next up, I have A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahira Mafi. And I found out that Tahira Mafi actually had a contemporary, particularly following a girl after the events of 9/11. I was truly interested to read this book and find out exactly what the story was about. I absolutely loved this one. We do follow a girl as a boy takes interest in her, and she is obviously skeptical because everyone around her is standoffish. They want nothing to do with her. It truly became one of my favorite books, particularly in contemporary. So it's definitely going in When's the Wedding. I truly felt for the main character. I was crying with her. I was mad at the things that they were doing to her, and truly seeing how cruel people can be to others just because of an event that took place and generalizes that common hatred. It was truly heartbreaking to read about. The next book we have is All Your Perfects by Colleen Hoover. We do follow a married couple as their marriage is in shambles and they don't really know how to get it back to where it was. That is literally the synopsis for this book. We do have certain trigger warnings in here for infertility and miscarriage, but I think this book truly made me question the origin of relationships and communication. This book in particular does use the miscommunication trope a lot, but I think given the events that happened to the main character Quinn, it is most definitely understandable to see her in that mental space. This book felt so realistic, not only in the romance, but also in the everyday things that happened to this couple. And I think one of the things that I loved the most was seeing Graham and Quinn at the same time deal with these situations in very different ways. I think the depiction of marriage was incredibly well done in this book. It also has the alternating timelines that I personally enjoy. Definitely a new favorite, and I am definitely putting that in When's the Wedding. Next up, we have Charming as a Verb by Ben Philippe. I adored this book so much. Definitely a book that I want on my shelves, most definitely. Another book that deals with college, dealing with great expectations coming from parents, particularly immigrant parents who expect nothing but the best from you. In this one, we follow Henry Haltiwanger, who is a star debater and a very popular kid at his academy, and his one dream is to attend Columbia University, and in order to save up to get there, he has his own dog walking business, which is essentially a ruse. It is kind of like a scam in a way, and he is obviously hiding that from the world. Then enter Corinne Troy, who is very what they would call bossy, and she offers a deal to Henry, basically help her overcome all of those things and become kind of popular in a way, and she will tell no one of his particular business. I think it is one of the best contemporaries that I have ever read, and I don't see a lot of people talking about Charming as a Verb, but I again think the whole conversation about immigrants and higher education and having to do whatever you need to in order to get to that place where you want to be, that conversation was really truly so well done. I also loved all of the cultural references in this one. I also loved his best friend. It reminded me so much of my brother. So this definitely goes up in, I think I'm gonna put this in When's the Wedding. The next book is Cemetery Boys, and I think we all know how I feel about Mr. Cemetery Boys. We do follow Yadriel, who is a trans boy and a brujo, and his family is not accepting him for whom he truly is. So he teams up with his cousin Maritza to raise the ghost of a dead family member, but instead he ends up summoning the ghost of the school's resident bad boy called Julian Diaz. The banter in here is A-level. The atmosphere, incredible. The way that Aiden Thomas grabs Latinx culture and twists it to fit his particular fantastical setting. The romance was also incredibly well paced for the amount of time that the book takes place in. Definitely a book that goes in When's the Wedding. I will literally read and buy anything that Aiden Thomas puts out. The next book we have here is a book that I don't know if I've talked about in my channel before. I know I have mentioned it on live streams, but on videos in particular, I am not quite sure, and I am talking about Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This is a Cinderella retelling, and we do follow a cyborg girl, and she lives in this very futuristic world in New Beijing, and she dedicates her life to fixing stuff. She is kind of a mechanic, and she soon meets the prince, but there is a lot of political intrigue. It is very spacey, very sci-fi with like a touch of fantasy. Again, Cinderella retelling, and the retelling aspect is very much here. I think the plot twist in this book was very obvious. Like, it is not well hidden in the slightest. But did I love this as much as I did A Curse of Dark and Lonely? Now that is the question. I am thinking, I think I genuinely enjoyed the second book a lot more, but I think I'm gonna put this in Let's Kiss. I think it was a pretty solid moment. I had fun reading this. Okay, so the next book we have in here is actually Chain of Gold by Miss Cassandra Clare, the first book in the Last Hours trilogy. This trilogy is the one that follows the Infernal Devices, and in here we follow the children of the main characters of the Infernal Devices, so it is kind of like a continuation before the Mortal Instruments. We do follow the Carstairs and the Blackthorns as they arrive to London, and they bring a plague with them. And London, after the events of the Infernal Devices, has pretty much been peace and quiet. There has been zero to none demonic activity. We have Cordelia as one of the main characters, whose true motivation is to give her father a fair trial. And then we have James, who is truly just the lover and he wants to find that epic love the way that his parents did. And just a great cast of characters all around. We have Matthew, who is one of my favorite characters in this book, I do have to say. This one most definitely feels a lot more character driven than her other stories. It just felt like it was either the character's motivations or nothing else was happening. So I'm gonna put this in Let's Kiss. This book made me feel so much. I cried, I was mad. There was one scene in particular in the whispering room, if you know what I'm talking about. And then just Matthew, I want to know more about Matthew's character. That ending just messed with me. Grace Blackthorne deserves no rights, okay? Grace Blackthorne shall receive no right. We have Crown of Midnight by Miss Mass. As you can see, there will be a lot of Miss Mass in here because she kind of took over my 2020 with reading, and Crown of Midnight is one of my favorite books in the series. I know a lot of people haven't found that particular book stellar, but I think this book gave me what I was looking from book one. I was just looking for Selena to be incredibly badass, to just be that incredible assassin that everyone praises her to be, and in this book, she just goes ahead and gives you that and so much more. The plot twist at the end was a twist that I already knew was coming. I spoiled myself, okay? And then I went down a rabbit hole and I spoiled myself some more. But in this particular case, it was still executed so incredibly well that I was still like excited. Like my heart was palpitating. So I was having heart palpitations during that book, okay? I was just so shocked. Although I knew what happened, and that's very rare to find in books. It's not quite there in Once the Wedding, so I am gonna put this in Let's Kiss. Oh boy, we have two back-to-back books written by Miss Tracy Wolff. The first one being Crave. Crave is a paranormal YA romance. In Crave, we follow Grace, who after losing her parents needs to move to Alaska with her uncle and her cousin, who are her only living relatives. And her uncle is actually the headmaster of Katmere Academy, which is an academy for supernatural beings, except that Grace does not know that in the slightest. There's dragons and werewolves and witches and gargoyles, and I think this is the first book that introduced me to gargoyles. I'd never read about gargoyles before, and I think Crave in particular as a first installment really hyped me up to know more about that lore. It was cheesy, the writing is not the best, it felt very fan fiction-y. It does give a lot of jabs to other books like Twilight. It does give you a lot of other pop culture references, which I hate in books. It gives you references to the Vampire Diaries, Legacies, Harry Styles. So this book definitely goes in average baby. Crave as a first installment was definitely more enjoyable than Crush, which is the book that I need to rank next. I would literally eat dirt before reading Crush again. That love triangle situation I do not enjoy. I rarely enjoy those. We did kind of get a little bit more world building, but I think I was just so fed up with the writing that was just bugging me that I just wanted this book to be over with. There was virtually no description in this book, and then the only description that we got was in battle scenes that I was just not excited about because the build up to that battle scene was just not there for me. I gave it a 1 star and I still stand by my opinion at It Must Be Burned at the Stake. These characters literally made their song Good Feeling by Florida. It just made no sense to me, okay? We have Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, a story that deals a lot with grief, with finding yourself and accepting the life and the card that you got dealt. Obviously a book written in verse where we follow Camino Rios and Yahaira Rios. One of them lives in the Dominican Republic and then the other one lives in New York. And Camino is actually awaiting her dad's flight that is coming from New York City, except once she gets to the airport, she gets probably the worst news of her life. And it's actually that her father's plane crashed. And right after that happens, she realizes that her dad was leading a double life, one in the Dominican Republic and another one in New York. I genuinely enjoy Elizabeth Acevedo's books so much. I think personally, as a Latina, I have never felt more heard in literature. I think regardless of what country you come from Latin America, there is certain elements that will make you relate to these characters. There are certain parts of the culture that are just universal despite where you live in, despite where you grew up with. I also genuinely enjoy how many deep topics she includes in these books, and particularly Clap When You Land definitely has a lot of plot despite it being in verse, which was fascinating for me. It will go at Let's Kiss. Miss Empire of Storms by Miss Mass. Again, she did it again. I think with Empire of Storms in particular, it was such a stellar book for me all around in regards to character dynamics, battle scenes, plot twists, twist. I was just weeping my eyes out at the end of this book. I will never forget how in emotional distress I was at the end. I literally stared at my bookshelf for an hour. Manon and Dorian, who were two characters that I didn't particularly care about in previous books, truly shined in their own right in this book. I think their character dynamic was great in this. And then we have Aiden and Lysandra, who were also really great. There is a sense of companionship and understanding there. Aelin and Rowan, as always, have incredible dynamics. I think how willing Rowan is to go to the ends of the earth for Aelin is just so, oh my god, it breaks my damn heart because the ending of this book was not fair. And the way that Lysandra literally carried the last third of this book was wild. This book most definitely goes in When's the Wedding. The next book I have is actually Fangirl, which I read earlier in the year, and I did not know all of the claims about the author in question with this book. I won't be ranking that book. I don't feel comfortable doing so. So this in particular will go at the bottom of the list, and I don't think I will be even ranking it. We have From Blood and Ash by Ms. JLA, the first book in the From Blood and Ash series. I think in particular it was the writing that was kind of not doing it for me. I kept running into that same wall of this book does feel kind of childish and naive and innocent, and I totally understand where that comes from because Poppy's mentality is in that headspace. And so when she meets Hawk Flynn, who is the royal guard assigned to her by the king and queen, she starts experiencing things that she hadn't quite experienced before given her task as the maiden. It was very interesting to see where JLA was going to take this world because there are little breadcrumbs that are picked up towards the end of the book. I'm putting this in Let's Kiss because I quite enjoyed this book, but it's not, I'm not marrying From Blood and Ash. I'm marrying Miss Aquafaf. We have Fouria by Jamila Sayed Mendez, another book written by a Latinx author, and in this one we follow Camila Hassan, who leads a double life. At home she is the perfect daughter, gets all the good grades, does all the chores, and behind the scenes, behind her parents' back, she is actually called La Furia, which is a very stellar football player. She wants to be a futbolera. There are a lot of themes about feminism and what it means to come from a small town because she does come from Rosario, Argentina, and how women create their own space because they are not given that space, and how they will take what they need to take because again it is not given to them. I was just thoroughly immersed in that journey. Definitely goes in Let's Kiss. It is definitely a very solid book. Another one that I really want to own physically so that I can reread. Oh boy. We have Historically Inaccurate by Shade Bravo, but we follow the main character. I believe her name is Sol, and we follow her after she loses her mom. I think her mom is actually deported, and to find herself she actually enrolls in the history club at her community college, and as initiation she is asked to break into one of the oldest homes and actually steal, I can't remember if it's a fork or a spoon. However, once she goes into this house she is caught by the grandson of the owners of the house. But I will say it very much felt like a Wattpad book, and although that is not a bad thing, it very much felt generic with the other things in there. I think the most interesting part of this book was actually the male love interest. That was the only character, to me at least, in my opinion, that was talking reason to Sol throughout the entirety of the book, and there was not enough plot in it for me to be as compelled in the story. I just think I kind of felt lost at the end because I didn't know exactly what I was reading. I was just kind of like trying to push through. But I will be putting this, however, in But Why. It did have the potential to be a great fun contemporary. I just kind of felt lost. We have Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Miss Mass. Crescent City is definitely such an incredible book. I cannot talk enough good things about this book. We do follow the main character, who is Bryce, and she is half fae, half human, as a very big tragedy ravages the city, and she finds herself in the midst of a murder investigation that she, alongside a fallen angel called Holland Athalar, will need to solve before it overtakes the entirety of the city. As a first installment, is definitely Miss Mass's most ambitious work to date, and it is actually her best first installment, in my opinion, as of date. I don't know if it's the length of the book or the fact that it's adult and it fits a lot more with her writing and her mentality right now. This book was such a strong first installment. It is lengthy in its world building, but in my opinion, it's easy to follow. The characters in this book, I find it's very hard to fall in love with characters right away from book one. This book truly did that for me. You truly get to play detective too while you read this. The plot twists in this book are actually great. The book focuses a lot more on friendship and companionship, which I I truly enjoyed because I thought this was going to be more along the lines of fantasy romance, which Aquatar could fall into. This definitely goes in When's the Wedding. We have Heir of Fire, also by Miss Mass, and Heir of Fire was also a very enjoyable book. I gave this book a 4.5. I do remember that. I think in this book in particular, we truly see Aylin's arc as a character, where she transitions from who she wants to be to whom she needs to be. And then in this book, we also get introduced to Manon, that I really was just like indifferent to Manon in this book. I was also indifferent to Dorian in this book. I think the most compelling arc in this was truly Aylin and Rowan, and seeing them meet and seeing their friendship and their dynamic progress throughout the book. I am not as in love with this book as I am other Miss Mass books, so I'm gonna put this at Let's Kiss because it was a cute moment. We have Head Over Heels by Hannah Orenstein, but Head Over Heels is a contemporary and we follow Avery, the main character. She used to be on the track to be an Olympic gymnast, except she suffers the biggest injury of her life that actually draws her back from even attempting to compete. But then she receives an offer to train another Olympic gymnast, or a gymnast that is on track to be an Olympian. And this book in particular deals with all of those claims that happened a few years back with the Olympic team from the US and all of the sexual assault claims that happened. The author herself was actually a gymnast, and I think that truly shines in this book. You can tell the love that she has for the sport in the way that the description was written, in the way that all of the claims were handled in this book. And although there is romance in this book, to me that was not the best part. The best part for me was the relationship between Avery and the girl that she had to train. And this book is going in Let's Kiss. Again, a very enjoyable story if you love reading about sports. We have Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco, a book that I definitely enjoyed. We follow twin sisters, and they are both Strega, which are witches. Their family owns a restaurant and they work there, and one day one of the sisters is actually late for dinner and she finds her dead body in the middle of the street. Then she meets Wrath, who is one of the princes of hell, and he actually offers to help her find out exactly what happened with her sister. And you can never really trust the wicked. I think the best part of this book was truly the atmosphere and the description that I really enjoyed. I'd never read a Carrie Maniscalco book before. I truly felt myself in that restaurant when they were cooking. I really enjoyed Wrath as one of the side characters. Kind of gave me everything that I really wanted with a Prince of Hell romance. So definitely a book that is going in Let's Kiss. I'm excited to read more Carrie Maniscalco. I know a lot of people love Stalking Jack the Ripper. Oh boy, we have Life and Death by Marissa Meyer. And this is essentially Twilight, but flipped. So it's gender bent. I actually didn't mind this book. Like, it was fine. I wouldn't say it was average. I think I'm gonna end up putting this at, but why? Why was it necessary? I don't know. I feel like if Twilight would have been the other way around, maybe it would have been more interesting. And then alongside that, just to get it out of the way, we actually have Midnight Sun by also Stephanie Meyer. Did I say Marissa Meyer with the other one? I probably did. We have Midnight Sun, which is Twilight from Edward's perspective. I don't know why Stephanie Meyer just keeps trying to squeeze the Twilight content from the same story from Edward's perspective. Nothing changes. Overly descriptive, but still doesn't tell you anything at all. You know what? It will be burned at the stake. It will be burned at the stake because I don't understand the purpose of this book. I do think it gives you a little bit more context. Bella has a little bit more personality. It was the craft of telling you and not showing you anything. It is very much internal. All right, the next book we have in this tier rank situation is actually Layla by Colleen Hoover. This is Colleen Hoover's first paranormal romance, and we follow Leeds as he meets Layla, and they think that they are the love of the lives of each other. And Layla has an accident. She can no longer go back to what she was. And so Leeds, in order to make Layla remember, takes her to the bed and breakfast where they met. Then he's torn between a B&B guest called Willow and Layla, and it's just messy, and it made virtually no sense to me. I think Miss Hoover should really stick to her romances, to her contemporaries, but to me it was just the writing got worse as I went. It felt like Colleen Hoover had given up on the writing as she went. I really do think this book must be burned at the stake, and I am so sad to say that because it was sent to me by the publisher, but it was not. I have Legendborn by Tracy Dion in here as well, a book that is an Arthurian retelling. We follow Bree after her mother's death, and she enrolls into a university level program, and on her very first night there she experiences a magical attack that will take her to a secret society where the Legendborn reside, and these people are somehow connected to the Arthurian legends that we used to hear when we were younger, like King Arthur and Merlin. I will say, since I am not that familiarized with all of the the lore, with all of the mythos of Arthurian legend. I did feel like it was very confusing at times with the whole terminology, whether it was the scion or the legendborn or the magic thing or the root magic. I just felt, for me at least, I was not as in tune with some parts of the story. I think character-wise, I think it was amazingly developed, but plot-wise, it was a little bit confusing to me. So I think this one definitely falls under the average baby. The second installment, the sequel, will shine a lot more because I will already be a little bit more immersed in the world. We have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia next. This is a book written by a Latinx author as well. This is a Gothic horror, so it mixes the elements of atmosphere with romance. In this one in particular, we follow Noemita Wada, who is a socialite, as she receives a letter from her cousin to actually come to her new estate in the outskirts of Mexico to save her from this very horrible thing that is happening over there. I think what's shown the most with this book was actually the characters. These characters are all so damn complex, and that was so fascinating to read about. I think that is truly the best aspect of this book, because everything else in regards to plot was either predictable or underwhelming, and maybe that's just because of the genre. Gothic horror is not meant to be thrilling by any means, so I think this definitely falls under average for me, but it is still a book that I recommend to people. Next up, I have Never Look Back by Lilian Rivera, and this is actually an Orpheus and Eurydice retelling, and we follow two Afro-Puertorriqueños as they meet and they essentially fall in love. Theus, who is the male character resembling Orpheus, is truly there just to save her from all the trauma that she suffered back when she lived in Puerto Rico. I really enjoyed about this book the fact that Theus was still a musician. Obviously, that is a big part of the story, and he is a bachata singer, so I love all of the Latinx elements in this book. I just think as far as retelling goes, I don't know if I see a lot of elements in this that were very original to the story. I think it followed very much how the original myth went. However, on the other hand, all of the Latinx elements that Lilian Rivera includes in the book definitely hyped me more for the entire story. So this is definitely a book that I'd kiss despite the retelling element not being the newest or more innovative, and it's still something that I'd actively recommend to people, and it's also a book that I have heard not a lot of people talk about. Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas is next, and this book I definitely enjoyed. We see a lot of dynamics with Alien and Aedion that I really enjoyed. Both of these characters have very different traumas that are chasing them, and once they unite, they need to realize and they need to sort out exactly how they fit together as cousins. And then we have Dorian, who I really started loving in this book. Dorian in this book was definitely not himself, but I quite enjoyed seeing him like that. The ending of this book, Dorian shone so much. We truly got to see the extent of his character and his paralysis. So definitely a book that I'd kiss. Oh boy, we have Romanov by Nadine Brandes, a book that is a retelling of sorts of the Anastasia Romanov story. This is a historical fiction because we do follow the Romanov family from Russia. It is kind of fantasy magical realism. I don't even know where I would fit this book. This book in particular was pitched as Anastasia wields magic and she is kind of powerful, and that is definitely not how the book goes. Anastasia in this book barely knows magic. She barely knows how to wield it. The magic system was also kind of weird to me, and the plot of the book basically goes along the lines of a Matryoshka doll, which actually Anastasia has to smuggle away in order to hopefully open the doll and release the spell that is inside it to essentially save her family. This book was kind of underwhelming in a lot of elements in what I read. I think the romance also was just kind of weird to me. It almost had the potential to be a really great romance, but everything about it just kind of felt childish, and maybe that had a lot to do with Anastasia's mentality. So definitely not my favorite. So I am going to put this in average baby, maybe. Next up, we have Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and this is definitely one of my favorite books that I read last year. We do follow different political figures. We follow the first son of the United States, Alex Claremont Diaz, and then the Prince of Wales, called Henry, as they have a very public display of their hatred for each other, and they need to stage a friendship in order to appease the media, but instead they end up falling for each other. I think the romance in here was just so well done. It was so beautiful. And then there's also a little bit of political escapism in here because we have the first female president of the United States. And honestly, every side character in this was just so incredible. I think my only criticism for this book. The chapters were really long for no reason, for being a romance. And then 2, the Latinx representation was not the best. That's why I ended up giving it a 4-star, although it does have the potential to be a 5-star. But it's still a book that I'd wet nonetheless, because I really enjoy this book so much. Definitely a book that I want to have physically so that I can tab, annotate, do all the things, because there were so many great quotes in here. It also had like that mixed media element of like email exchange. I have a book that a lot of people are going to come at me for. Don't come at me, please. I say this in the nicest way possible. We have Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I did not like this book, and that just stresses me out to even say it, because I know it's a lot of people's favorites. I did spend my own money on this. Like, I bought the book physically. I was hella excited to read this. I knew there was a Netflix show coming up. The book's writing was very YA. The storyline itself felt very adult. So it was just conflicting elements to me, where the book felt very much like Game of Thrones, very adult, like very wintry power fantasy. And then the writing was very much YA. And then I felt like as the story progressed, we ran into a lot of cliches and into a lot of overused tropes. I just think I did not read this book at the right time. I just don't think the book is it. I'm so sorry for anyone who loves this book, but I will burn it at the stake. We have Saga Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Brian K. Vaughan, a sci-fi meets fantasy, and we follow 2 soldiers from opposing sides of the war as they fall in love and they have a kid together, and now they are being hunted by the entirety of the galaxy because they committed treason. I think the first one, though, to me, because it was my first graphic novel, although it was enjoyable, it was not as good as the second one. So the first one I'm going to put in Let's Kiss. It was certainly enjoyable in a lot of aspects. It was action-packed. The illustrations were beautiful. The color palette chosen was fantastic as well. But the second one, it's definitely When's the Wedding. We have familial dynamics, different POVs. We have interwoven timelines as well, which I definitely enjoy. It ends in a cliffhanger, and I love cliffhangers. Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. This is the sequel to Cinder, and I do have to say, I think I enjoyed Scarlet a lot more than Cinder. Red Riding Hood retelling was more interesting than Cinderella, because there are a lot more Cinderella retellings out there. But although this book was very insta-lovey, I still kind of like vibed with it, and I really do not enjoy insta-love, but I don't know what it was about like the wolf and the grandma and like the mission of finding the grandma because the grandma disappeared, and then it being set in France, and there's a lot of food involved in this, and then at the end of the book, the characters from Cinder and these characters come together. I truly need to reread the Lunar Chronicles. I actually need to finish the Lunar Chronicles. Next up, we have Scythe by Neil Schuster Man. Okay, everyone's adding me because I say Neil Schuster Man. One of my favorite books of the year instantly goes in When's the Wedding. I don't think I need to talk too much about this book. A lot of important themes in here, a lot of important topics discussed and addressed, like race, overpopulation, corruption. I just adored Scythe so much, and I'll shut up about it because I talk about it way too much. Next up, we have actually a nonfiction, which is Save the Cat, and this is essentially a book about writing. It breaks down all of the basics of writing, all of the questions that need to be answered in order to plot a novel. It was such an eye-opening book. I definitely enjoyed that. I recommend that book to anyone who is interested in ever writing a book. It definitely helps you so much to clear your head and get a clearer picture. That's kind of repetitive. Definitely When's the Wedding. Then we have The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, the last book in the Poppy War series. I will actually rank all of the Poppy War books right now. I do have a reading vlog for the Poppy War, so I won't get too into it, but essentially it is a historical fiction slash fantasy that is inspired on the events of the rape of Nanking. It follows Rin, who is a peasant girl, as she aces the Keju and is introduced to the Synagogue, which is the best military academy in all of the empire, and there she is again bullied and abused as she was back home, and she eventually finds out that she possesses the ancient art of shamanism, which is forbidden, and she is actually being claimed by the Phoenix, who is the god that claims bloodshed and just madness. And I will do this very quickly, no remorse in this. The entirety of the Poppy War, including the rape of Nanking, which was part of the source material to write the Poppy War, goes into When's the Wedding. The way that it deals with so many historical events and trigger warnings and abuse and drug addiction, it was just handled in such a fantastic way. It was action-packed and the character arcs were incredible. The character dynamics, the way that it was so realistic and it depicted war. I am just in awe of R.F. Kuang, and anything that R.F. Kuang puts out, I will buy and I will read, no questions asked. We have The Songbird of Ballots and Snakes, which is the prequel to The Hunger Games. This is by Suzanne Collins, and we actually follow President Snow in his teenage years as he prepares to be a mentor for the Hunger Games. I think this is the first quarter quill. I can't really remember what number they are, but it's pretty early on. It was pretty interesting to see how the Hunger Games were crafted and how they got to the point where they were in the Hunger Games and how active of a role President Snow had in it back in the day. I softly DNF'd this book. I probably will pick up this book in 2021 again and giving it a retry. I will put this in average baby because although there are certain elements of this book that I found repetitive towards the beginning, I will say it does have the potential to be maybe better. Next up, we have the entirety of the Truly Devious trilogy written by Maureen Johnson, where we follow Stevie Bell, who loves true crime and she wants to be a detective for a living. And once she receives the invitation to Ellingham Academy, which is an academy that has a crime that happened in it but it was never solved, where 80 years in the past the founder's daughter and wife were kidnapped and murdered, and Stevie really wants to solve this murder. The first book in the series was definitely really great. I think it was very plot heavy, and although the characters were really compelling in that first book, I think the characters shined a little bit more in book 2 towards the beginning. Ooh, but I enjoyed the first book so much. I was so gripped with book 1. Book 1 kind of gave me the creeps, although it is a YA thriller. I think I'm genuinely gonna put Truly Devious, the first book, in When's the Wedding because I really enjoyed it. And then The Vanishing Stair, which is the second one, the plot twist at the end was fantastic. The characters, again, towards the beginning were fantastic as well. Definitely When's the Wedding. And then the third one was just a little bit all over the place for me, but it was still very enjoyable. I read that book so fast as well. Like, I binged the second and the third one. I think I'm gonna put it at Let's Kiss. Next, we have Miss Addie LaRue, written by V.E. Schwab, a book that is very atmospheric. We follow a girl who makes a Faustian bargain with a god that answers after dark for immortality. The catch, though, is that she won't be remembered by anyone she meets until 300 years later, where she meets a boy, a man, essentially, I don't know why I always say a boy, in a hidden bookstore in New York City. Very descriptive, borderline lyrical with the writing. It is a slow, mellow book. It is not meant to be plot driven at all. It's very character driven, but I think the topic of dying without making any significant impact or change was something that, to me at least, hit very close to home. So it's definitely going in Let's Kiss, because when I compare it to the books that I have up there, it's not quite there. We have The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang next. It is a romance, very steamy. We follow Stella, who has Asperger's, and she doesn't really understand relationships or their dynamics, where her parents keep pressuring her to get a boyfriend, to date, to get married, to have kids, and so she hires a male escort to actually help her find all of the ins and outs of dating that she definitely does not know. It was the best form of escapism and romance that I found last year. Just so incredible. I think it was also fascinating to read about a character that has Asperger's. I had never seen that type of representation before in books. Definitely Let's Kiss. I read this in one sitting and it was a great time. I was really flustered with those steamy scenes, okay? I was not expecting it to be that steamy. Next up, we have The Miracles of the Namiya General Store by Keigo Higashino. It is a magical realism. It is translated work where we follow 3 delinquents as they are stuck in a general store and they start corresponding with the people from the past. I just think this book fell kind of short for me because of the writing. The writing was very straightforward. It was not flowery. It was not overly descriptive. I felt like the book overall was very inconsistent, although the plot line itself was compelling. I think all of the different characters and their dynamics and their storylines, and it is a multi-generational story. There is a lot of woven plot lines together with different timelines. It was a little bit all over the place for me, and I found myself being disinterested at times. So definitely average baby. I'd still encourage people to read this book because it is translated work, and I think there are a lot of important lessons in this book regardless. Let's first rank the Throne of Glass books that I have left. We have Throne of Glass, the first book. This book was very average to me. Again, I've been over this with the other books that I was talking about from Miss Mask, but it does serve as a nice prologue for everything that is to follow. Then we have Tower of Dawn, which is it's not a novella, but it is kind of like its own separate thing where we follow Kaol, where he goes to this entirely separate continent to seek for alliance from this Kaganate. I think it's pronounced Kaganate. We have Irene Towers, and then Nesrin and Sartak. This This is definitely a book about healing. Plot twist in this book I was not expecting. I would make babies, wed, marry my entire line of children. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. The healing progress in this book, the character arcs. We have The Night Swim by Megan Golden. This is an adult thriller where we follow a podcast host as she travels to this new town to actually cover a new trial case that follows a rape victim, and at the same time where she's doing that, she actually starts receiving letters from this other girl to try and solve a cold case that happened many years in the past. This book talks a lot about rape culture and how rape victims are villainized for being on trial and for speaking their truth, and I love the way that that conversation was approached. It was done very respectfully. I also loved the mixed media element in this book, where some chapters were the podcast and then other chapters were present time, and then other chapters were in the past where we see that girl who is giving her letters, her past with her sister. Definitely a book that I'd kiss over and over again because I thoroughly enjoyed it. We have The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, another book that I have raved about enough as is. We follow Xiomara Batista as she joins her slam poetry club at her high school after living in a very sheltered life, and she finds her own voice and her purpose through poetry. This book is beautiful. I've never felt more heard in literature than with The Poet X. This was the first time I annotated a book more so aligned with my personal experiences and my opinions rather than critiquing writing. So definitely a book that I'd wed over and over again. I'd marry this book 5 different times if I could. Then we have The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, a romance, an adult romance, hate to love, enemies to lovers, however you want to call it. It also has the fake dating trope, as we have these two people who completely despise each other and they need to take the place of their siblings in their honeymoon and pretend that they are married for the sake of taking their place and having fun. It was steamy, it was funny, the proposal meets just go with it. It was just so genuinely funny. Like, I found myself laughing throughout this book. I definitely kissed this book over and over again. I'm excited to read more Christina Lauren eventually. Then we have These Violent Delights by Miss Chloe Gong. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1920s Shanghai, where we have members from rivaling gangs as they need to put their guns aside and come together to figure out the mystery that is this monster that is ravaging the city of Shanghai and killing members from both sides of their gangs. There was so much political intrigue in here. It was so incredibly interesting. Juliet was so badass, and I thoroughly enjoyed the fact that the main character, like the female lead, was more badass than the male lead. Like Roma was very soft in this book. You definitely see all the love that he holds for Juliet. The way that Juliet just whips out them guns and knives and is willing to do anything was so enjoyable to read about. I definitely wet this book over and over again. For a Shakespeare retelling, 10 out of 10. We have Verity by Colleen Hoover, another Coho book, and one that is very polarizing. Like, I feel this book is either a very big hit or a very big miss. And in here we follow a writer who is in the brink of bankruptcy, and then she receives the offer of a lifetime by the husband of a New York Times bestselling author to actually finish said author's series that she can no longer finish herself. Said girl goes to their home while she starts seeing the notes that the author has, and she actually ends up finding some really dark stuff in here. Everything is set up in a way where you truly question whether the things happened or didn't happen. This book is a lot, so just be mindful of those trigger warnings before you go in. But this book is fantastic. Like, I'm sorry for the people that didn't enjoy Verity, but this one is definitely going on the altar with me. Like, I'd marry this book. We also have Vicious by V.E. Schwab, and this is almost like a Heroes meets Marvel situation. We follow the two main characters as they start exploring these people called the Extraordinaries, who are people with superpowers, and they want to figure out exactly how they work, so they start experimenting to see exactly how they can get there as well. The characters in this are so complex. Like, the book truly makes you question whether people are inherently bad or good, like if evil is made or is born, and there are a lot of questions like that throughout the entirety of the novel. It was just very exciting, it was fast-paced, and it just gave me the vibes that Heroes did when I was growing up. It was one of my favorite shows. You know what? I'd wet this book. I think it's very different from Addie LaRue. This book, again, is very fast-paced. The writing style is very different. Last, we have When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. This is a thriller where we follow Sydney, who lives in her Brooklyn neighborhood. She was born, raised, and she has lived there her entire life. But then suddenly, buildings start disappearing, new people start moving in, strange things start happening all around in her neighborhood, and it is a story that deals a lot with the theme of gentrification and racism. And the themes in this book were so well written. I had never read read anything more accurate in my life, and I was so damn mad for the entirety of this book because it is absolutely unreal how people could behave like this. Drives me absolutely nuts. The thriller aspect of this book is the best towards the beginning of the book. When you get towards the later part of the book, when the twist is revealed and when the climax happens, it just all goes down the drain for me. I feel like the ending made virtually no sense with how the story was progressing. For the themes and the characters, it's definitely a let's kiss moment. I think the themes are so important to talk about. And those are all the books that I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this tier rank situation. Again, I didn't exactly want to make like all of the books that I read in 2020 just like a standard video. I did want to make a video that was a little bit more fun, a little bit more engaging for you. I want to hear all of your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear if your thoughts align with mine or if for some reason we disagree. I feel like a lot of people are going to disagree with me on so many of these, but I am ready to hash it out in the comments. I am ready to talk about it. Let me know down below what were some of the best books that you read in 2020. Let me know down below if you've read any of these because I certainly am interested in knowing. If you reached the end of the video, leave some book emojis down below in the comments, just like an individual book. I think that'll be a cute moment, whichever book you want. Don't forget to subscribe down below for more bookish content. I am constantly uploading videos that I am sure you do not want to miss. I am also live streaming throughout the week and doing my weekly reading sprint. You can also follow me on all of my social medias, which are linked down below. I have an Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and an Amazon wish list. That is it for today, you guys. I'm trying to wrap up pretty quickly. It is 1:58 a.m. for me, so I love you, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye, guys.